Well, good evening, Confabulation. Happy to be here. So let me start by asking you a question. Have you ever had a terribly embarrassing situation happen that you just hope that nobody saw it? I'm not talking about like tripping up a staircase though. Well, let me tell you, I had a very embarrassing thing happen and I felt like everybody saw it. And soon you're going to see why I call this story the black hole. Okay? The year was 1994 and it was sometime in the fall because I remember the cold Himalayan night air. And I was on a bus journey. This journey traveling from Varanasi, India, up over the mountains and heading deep into the valley of Kathmandu. Now you have to understand, this is a long trip. It requires two drawn-out bus rides. The first ride took me through the northern plains of India, and then it dropped me in Sonali, which is a really dusty border town of Nepal. And I knew that a town like Sonali, I had two choices. Either I can take a hotel for the night, one of the many bug-infested rooms that they have there, none of which have a view, by the way, or I could hop right on the night bus to Kathmandu where I would probably get a better night's sleep. So to me the choice was obvious. I was going to sail right through. However, there was a glitch in my plan. The bus that I was on was typical of all buses that run through India. It was late. So much so that we arrived in Sonali way behind schedule. I didn't even think I had a chance to catch that last bus out of there. But I was going to do it at any cost. So I got off the bus running and I ran through customs, I made my way through immigration, I got my passport stamped, and I just kept on running. And I even shocked myself because I made it onto that last bus just as it was leaving the station. And I didn't even have a ticket. And it was a full ride. There wasn't a seat to be had. So I paid a little baksheesh to the ticket boy. And for anyone that doesn't know, baksheesh is like a standard local bribe. Everybody does it. And it was interesting because what seemed like just pennies to me was probably more money than that kid had seen all month. And it was as though I had just made an instant comrade for this leg of my journey. So he cleared a spot on the floor for me and tucked my backpack away safely. And he even lent me a burlap sack to protect me from the dirty floor. So at this point I was so exhausted, past the point of even caring. So I laid down that burlap sack and I got on it in a fetal ball with the intention of sleeping. Well, it was at this moment that I realized I had to pee, but badly. As that bus was winding its way up through the Himalayas, my bladder was feeling like a jellyfish just sloshing around on the floor of that bus. Every bump that we took, it felt like I was going to lose it. I was holding on so tight because the last thing I wanted was to wet myself. And I couldn't wait for the bus to stop, but I wasn't going to ask for them to stop because everybody on the bus was settled and sleeping. And I didn't want to be that odd traveler that disturbs everybody's journey. No. And I felt like I was the only foreigner on that bus. Chances are I was. So I was trying to go unnoticed. I was just playing it cool, and all I wanted to do was blend in. Well, it actually turned the whole other way because instead of blending in, I became that crazy tourist that I'm sure they never forgot. I wouldn't be surprised if they're still talking about me. So after what felt like an eternity, the bus finally stopped. I jumped up so quickly, and with the use of both of my elbows, I plowed my way off that bus. I was on a mission. But I have to tell you, this is no Greyhound bus stop, okay? There are no toilets. But I was a seasoned traveler, and I knew I could squat anywhere. I even had a splotch of toilet paper in my hand ready for the occasion. So I ducked behind a building to get a little privacy. And it was dark, but I had just enough light to see that there was a step down. So I took it slowly, took one step first, when all of a sudden my other foot slipped right through the dirt. And before I knew it, I was standing waist deep in a pool of slime and dirty water. Yeah. Well, I tried to climb my way out, but the walls kept caving in under my hands. So needless to say, I relieved my bladder. I mean, it couldn't have gotten any worse, right? So, and I want to tell you, what a sensation to feel that sense of total relief combined with utter panic, all in the same wave. What a sensation. I don't wish it on any of you. So at that moment, though, I had to scream for help because I realized I was sinking deeper into this hole. It felt like I was in quicksand, like there were vacuums just sucking me deeper and deeper into this hole. And I screamed. It took a while, but eventually the bus driver and another man came out to my rescue. They each grabbed an arm and they yanked me out of this hole. And I could see the look in their kind Nepalese eyes. They were horrified. They didn't know what to do with me. They kind of left me in the dark and walked away. So I found myself some water and I washed my hands. And I stayed back in the dark while I let everybody get resettled on the bus. And just as the bus was ready to go, I got myself back on. And I kicked my mucky shoes off and I got back into my fetal position, hoping that nobody even noticed me or the smell that was emanating from my presence. And then I slept. And I slept. And some hours later, the bus stopped again. And all I wanted to do was get out and breathe a little bit. And so I was looking for my shoes. I found one of them, put it on my foot. Couldn't find the other shoe anywhere. So I let everybody clear off the bus so that I can scrounge along this dirty floor looking for my shoe. And I looked and I looked and I looked. I think I covered every inch of that bus until finally there it was, a shoe, not my shoe. My shoe was nowhere to be found. Disappointed, I tossed the shoe back. And at this point, I figured my reputation, whatever reputation I may have had, was completely shot. So I got off the bus anyway, one shoe on and one soggy sock on the other foot. I even bummed a cigarette from the bus driver, and I sat on a rock and I smoked. And at this point, the sun was starting to come up, and everybody was beginning to see my true colors. Shitty brown. But nobody was even looking at me. They were way too embarrassed. Not even my comrade, my bus ticket boy. He wouldn't even look at me. He even wanted his burlap sack back. Yeah, so nobody would look at me. So at that time, I had an opportunity to observe my fellow travelers. And at that point, I spotted my shoe. There it was at the end of a little Nepalese man's leg. And did he not notice that it was full of crap? Seriously. So I went over, not speaking the language, I played charades with him. I pointed at the poopy shoe on his foot, and then I pointed at my bare foot. Well, he got it. I could tell by the look of disgust in his face. And then I continued the charades to explain to him that his shoe was definitely on that bus, shot into a corner somewhere. Anyway, eventually we did arrive in the outskirts of Kathmandu. We stopped at a bus station there. And the bus was continuing into the city, but I was nowhere near ready to go into that city. I was meeting friends in the city, and the last thing I wanted was for them to see me like this. So I stopped at that bus park, and I decided to check into the first hotel that advertised hot water. It was on their sign, hot water, and that's a rare commodity in that part of the world. Hot water, I'm in. I don't care how much it is. I made a deal with the guy to rent the room for just an hour. That's all I need. I would have shook his hand on it, but he didn't want to. So I made my way up to the room, turned that shower on, and promises, promises, promises. That shower was freezing. But I did what I had to do. I got clean, washed my shoes, put on some fresh clothes, went down, yelled at the clerk for a bit, and then made my way into Kathmandu. Leaving this crappy adventure behind me, or so I thought, okay, because my shoes carried the scars of that experience in the way of stains. There was nothing I could do to get these crappy stains out of my shoes, and everywhere I went, people would point at my shoes and go, "What happened?" And my go-to answer was, "I stepped in a puddle." And then I'd change the topic and move on with the discussion. You see, it was all still very fresh, and it hurt. And, you know, but at this point in time, things have settled a little bit. And now I've come to this conclusion that in life, no matter how big, how deep, or how crappy a hole is, I empower myself to know that I can get out of anything. And in retrospect, they're all just little puddles. Here.